All right. So as I mentioned, my name is Jason Dunn. I'm a product marketing manager here at Sumo Logic on the platform team. And today we're going to walk through, as you can see in the screenshot here, we'll really get into the platform itself, and we'll walk you through some of the out-of-the-box content that can really help you cover all PCI compliance requirements as you think about how to really improve your compliance posture, and kind of accelerate those insights, whether it's during audit season or out of audit season, really be able to glean out the most relevant insights according to what your engineering team's kind of needs are around that. So, most commonly, I should preface this with saying, we have countless customers that rely on Sumo today. We'll get into some of the numbers to be more specific in the next couple slides here. But quite a few customers that rely on Sumo to really make sure that they're covering all 12 of their PCI compliance requirements, and that they kind of have a much more kind of fine-tuned process for how they would attack that, and make sure that they have a close eye on, and also are very proactive with kind of the more alerting and setting up of these alerts that could either be triggering through email or through Slack, et cetera, in order to really have actionable insights to respond to. So some of the most common challenges, I'll just actually back up for a second and say, for sure, cardholder data would be a very common example of that. So we'll talk through kind of the ways in which financial data can be masked or hashed before it even comes into Sumo. And then once it is, in cases that you are going to be including some aspects of financial data, how you can actually keep a closer eye on making sure that not only is it being tracked closely, but also there's clarity around what, for example, the retention periods are, and visibility into what types of data are being brought into the system. So a lot of the really common challenges that we see with customers around PCI compliance are, firstly, just either a complete or complete lack of cloud support, or a limited sense of cloud support within current tooling, whether that's something you've built out internally, or another organization's tool that you're using in place of this. So, the main disadvantage that you'll see is that it just simply won't scale to handle those cloud workloads that you're really working to track and protect and monitor as well. So the second piece would be slow cycles for PCI readiness. It can be really time consuming to add these kind of extra hurdles or kind of stop gaps as you progress, and it can prevent processes from being really tightened up when you're trying to really in the process of really deploy products or increase product development life cycles. The last thing you want is for PCI compliance to be what stands in the way of shipping product. Complexity would be a third, of course. So perhaps it covers these other two first bullets, but at the same time, it's a solution that is highly complex and not easy to pass off and share between various teammates, especially if it's something built internally. Maybe it's a situation where it requires spinning something up in terminal and running through processes on your own, or running your own set of applications using open source tooling as an example. And then, of course, and we won't go into as much detail today, but just sheer price tag, right? You see a lot of solutions with very fixed licensing that don't necessarily align correctly or align well with your business needs, or what you're actually looking to achieve with that platform. So, in light of that, Sumo Logic as a platform, as you can see here on the right, is very focused on allowing you to bring in very disparate data sources, right? So that could include, firewall data, database data, operating system data, the list goes on. It could also even be microservices that are part of that internal tooling that you've built, or even microservices that are affecting your customers directly. And you're able to then bring in all of these data sources and have a monitoring and analysis tool that exists under one platform. And as it relates to what we're talking to today, that can really contribute to rapid PCI readiness that is applicable for both cloud and on-premise environments. So, I think so far we've kind of chatted through more of the cloud elements, but 100% the on-prem data that you want to bring in would be done through what we call a local collector. And so you can do that collection process rather than using a hosted collector that would be used to typically bring in cloud data. And like I said, I'm just going to breeze through a couple more quick slides, and then we can really get into the platform. I want to make sure that you have a sense of how the platform functions, and also what's available to you out of the box. And we'll touch on a little bit of how you can customize that to kind of align with your needs. So kind of jumping back to the 2 slides to the challenges piece, we talk about lack of cloud support, slow cycles to readiness, complexity, and price tag. And this is kind of the advantages that you would get with Sumo, right? So it's very much, Sumo itself has been built on AWS from day one. So it's very much a highly scalable and elastic platform that we now have very much automated the processes by which we can allow our customers to spool up quickly on the platform. And everything will happen behind the scenes because of it being a cloud native platform by definition. Rapid compliance readiness, for sure, we're here today to talk about that, right? So we'll talk about these broad integrations, but also the pre-built reports, dashboards, the queries that underpin those dashboards. So something that you can just get up to speed with really quickly, sort of in line with that ease of use and flexibility. So you can very much, as you can see in this diagram here, you can bring in all sorts of different types of data sources in order to be flexible to what your needs are. And you can also set up alerts to be conscientious about what your ingest management looks like. If you don't necessarily want operating system data to be the lion's share of what your data is and spend is that's coming into the system, then for sure that's something you would want to set up alerts on to kind of tamp that down, or even use ingest budgets or partitions to actually manage the amount of data that you're bringing into the system accordingly. And then cost effective, we kind of talked about the tiering capabilities and the partitioning and abilities to manage ingest management. But as well, on top of that, we very much operate with the credits model, which allows you to assign credits to what the correct type or use case or usage of Sumo Logic is as a platform for your particular use case. So probably if you're here today, you're likely familiar with the 12 requirements of that contribute to ensuring that you are compliant with all the PCI requirements. So these are not specific to Sumo here necessarily, but we'll go through each of these 12 within the platform. So I'm not going to run through them all 12 now, but some of the ones that we'll especially be highlighting today are we'll for sure be looking at firewall and firewall configuration data. We'll look at the encryption, how you track the encryption of transmission of cardholder data. We'll look at all 12, like I said. I would say another few callouts quickly would be requirement 8, so identification, authentication of access to various system components. And then the access to network resources and cardholder data and the ability to track and monitor against that. So for sure, requirement 10 would be absolutely in Sumo Logic's wheelhouse. It's something that a lot of our customers come to us for and with a lot of enthusiasm around executing against. So I think if we can just keep these in the back of our mind throughout, and we may actually jump back to the slide all throughout. Requirement 3, I'll just call out quickly. Protecting stored data is extremely critical to Sumo Logic and how we think about how we protect customer data. It won't be shown in dashboard form and probably goes beyond the scope of this call, but we do have very specific encryption processes and also many compliance reports that we can send if you have questions about how we go about actually storing data and what the relationship is between ourselves and customers and even partners as it relates to the ability to make sure that stored data is being protected properly. So I'll just breeze through this one. As I said, we have 2,000 plus customers, 30 million plus searches being performed every day. So being leaned on really heavily by a really wide customer base for us, and just want to kind of give you a sense of scale. 100 petabytes data analyzed daily. This will give you a sense. We're going to be zoomed in on the platform, but there's this kind of broader view on the amount of data that Sumo kind of takes in every day and really sifts through. So we'll actually end on the slide at the very end, but I also, if you want to just get up and running now, you're more than welcome to do so. It'd be at sumologic.com/sign-up, and you can just go and kickstart a free trial. You could even run it through during today's demo and kind of run almost kind of mirror what I'm showing you here now. So cool. I'm just going to double check and do feel free to pop in questions as we go. I'll probably address them all at the end, unless it's something that's specific to a given dashboard. And feel free to just add them there, and we can collect as we go. And you know, and we'll kickstart this right away. So like I said, I think, you know, probably if you're on this call, you may be familiar even with Sumo itself already. You may be just looking to go that extra level of detail into how Sumo tackles PCI compliance in particular. But I do want to quickly just give you a lay of the land before we dig into the dashboards themselves. So in light of that, so essentially, as you can see here, this is kind of let's kind of start on the left side actually. So everything along here is going to show you all the existing content within your organization. So if you're interested in Nginx data in particular, you can search and you can see that many other folks have already created Nginx dashboards and made them publicly available. Or you can search whatever the most relevant piece of content is. There is totally sharing functionality and the ability to copy over dashboards between various folders if you're interested or concerned with permissions. That's absolutely something that, on one hand, things are quite shareable. On the other hand, things can be very much contained within the correct folders according to what you actually want to be able to give people the capability of seeing or not seeing. You can see here, and I don't want to get too lost in the details, but just quick sense of the layout here. So you'll be able to see all of your collectors that are set up. You can drill into logs and metrics details and kind of the configuration around them here. Administration, obviously most applicable for if you yourself are running the Sumo account on behalf of your organization. And so this is the app catalog. This is going to point you to all of the existing you know, content that's already available to you. So if you're really interested in AWS Lambda and just want to get off to the races, you can preview dashboards here. And then if it looks close to what you're looking for or what you're trying to maybe customize, you can just pop in what the correct collector names are, or even just wildcard on them. So in this case, we might just say everything that says Lambda, let's include that within the scope of that source category that's being included. And then you can capture a wider array of various source categories. So yeah, probably more detail than we need today, but just want to make sure you guys understand that everything I'm showing you today, actually not everything, but I'll say 80% of what we're showing today is available here. And particularly in the compliance and security category, if we search PCI, basically everything we'll see today is a derivation of AWS CloudTrail, VPC Flow, Linux, Palo Alto, et cetera. We have dedicated PCI content for each of them. This one would be a little bit more of an actual custom. This would be custom work with our professional services team. In this particular case, there are some queries that are available out of the box, but all of these other, so these 5 other sort of apps within the app catalog and all the dashboards within those apps are available to you on day one right away. So let's kind of dig in here. So I'm going to actually start. We'll kind of run through everything at the dashboard level, and just keep in mind all throughout that that queries underpin those dashboards. So just think of that as kind of the hierarchy, at least for the session today, and we can kind of talk through what the ways in which queries help to support the logic that actually underpin each of these dashboards. So in this case, we're just looking at the overview of you know, this is sort of a good starting place for thinking through all the ways in which you might want to have a closer eye on what the most pressing matters are when it comes to requirements. So as we can see here, we just see a grand total of 8,380 incidents, or sorry, 8,380 incidents in the last 15 minutes that have hit. And so you get a sense of the kind of scale of the number of events that are being tracked, and the kind of raw messages that are being distilled down into being considered as incidents. And then we can see the actual requirement type. We can see the requirement 6 is responsible for close to 74,000 counts. So it's something that we want to drill down to in the last 7 days. It seems to be an area of focus that would be worth giving some attention to. And then we can see more of a timeline or a progression where, for the most part in this larger view, we see that requirement 2 is oftentimes responsible in this tighter gap of 3 days. We see in the stack bar chart that requirement 3 as well as requirement 1 seem to be responsible for some portion of it. So relatively self-explanatory, but it can be a good starting place as you kind of think about which dashboards to drill down into from there. So requirement 1 is really the focus on installation and maintenance of firewall configurations. So this is going to allow you to take a closer look at firewall data and make sure that configurations align with what your expectations are. For example, we can see denied traffic over time. And granted, this is a pretty narrow window of time. We're just looking at 60 minutes, but it looks like there is a pretty significant drop off in traffic most recently. So that might be something that we want to investigate. I would say also, since we're looking at silently dropped traffic over time, denied traffic over time, if we see changes in traffic patterns or unexpected behavior that doesn't align with what you expect the firewall configuration, almost with the second order effects that you anticipate there to be, then this would be a really good kind of early vector to evaluate in order to kind of follow up from there. If you have already some pre-understanding of what your expectation is around what, for example, how much UDP versus TCP traffic you're expecting to see coming in, or network activity, then this would be something that you could use as it's distilled down, and it's sort of a clarifying point to say, okay, this is actually out of line with what we expect for firewall configuration. We thought that we had made some changes that would yield, for example, reduce network activity for OSP FIGP in this particular instance. So just areas of focus that could be potentially something you could drill down into. And then if we jump into requirement 2, so just switching gears, and we'll actually come back to firewall a little bit later as well. This is really focused on preventing use of vendor supply defaults for passwords and other security parameters as well. So in this case, we're actually looking at default logins and any failed logins attached to those, any default logins for root user in particular. So any scenarios where we see the default is being utilized, that might be sort of a red flag, especially when it's attached to a root user. And that might be something that we want to drill into. Relatively self-explanatory again on this one. I think it can be used as kind of an early indicator of any sort of account credentials that need updating, or perhaps were never updated in the first place, and also telling you what kind of activities are attached to that, which we'll get into in the next couple of dashboards here. So requirement 3 we touched on already. We talked about how stored data is protected within Sumo. And for sure, that's almost its own session, but for sure it's worth a couple bullet points around. And for sure we can get you compliance reports or details around our encryption processes to make sure that you feel confident with your data being stored in a protected way within Sumo. So jumping ahead to requirement 4, the focus here is really encryption and transmission of cardholder data. And this is a really critical aspect of PCI compliance requirements because you're dealing with financial data that is particularly sensitive. So in this case, there are a lot of different views on how you can evaluate encryption and transmission, and this probably wouldn't be the only dashboard that you would use in order to do that. But in this case, we're looking at insecure allowed traffic by target port, insecure allowed traffic by protocol, and the breakdowns for each of them. And what that's going to tell us is the cases in which traffic is not necessarily being secured in the best possible way. So we're actually looking, and let's actually look at the query at this point. So this is the first time within the scope of this demo, we're drilling down deeper into the query. We can see that we're scoping this against Palo Alto Networks data, and we're saying all the traffic that's being allowed on various ports. And then there's various logic to extract the correct type of data. And then we're saying only allow or only show scenarios where traffic is being allowed. And then let's kind of take a closer look at that, evaluate the destination ports for each of them. And you start to get a little bit of a visual sense here of how you can actually map to sort of these red flags that need to be evaluated against. Actually, while we're at it, we can look at, if you go to save as here, you have the option to then schedule this search, which is a synonym here for setting up an alert. So in this case, if we don't want to see, or we're not expecting to see any insecure allowed traffic, obviously in this case, it would be a very noisy alert. So we'd probably want to set some more thresholds, but we can add various participants here. So we could add my name here. And we can decide also if we want to set this up as a webhook, for example, and or a ServiceNow connection. We can send this into Slack if we so choose. We can set the thresholds, like I said. So if we only want to do for results that are greater than, say, 500, because we know that it's otherwise going to be a very noisy alert, then we have that option. And you can also adjust even the logic of just the language within the email subject itself, so that if you have Gmail alerts set up on the back end or even Slack connections, then you can do these kind of deeper integrations on that front. So cool. So a little pressed for time, but we can. So I'll kind of breeze ahead here. So requirement 5 is really focused on protecting all systems against malware and updates to those anti-malware software that go into place. So we're looking at, in this case, we see a higher degree of high malware severity occurring within this pie chart, which indicates to us that there's probably a lot more to follow up with and have a deeper understanding on. And then we can see the specific recent malware. So we can see ransomware, we see virus coming in attached to Google Drive and Box in this demo environment. And then we can even break it down by top malware types and even source IPs, and start to see if these are, not, you can't say expected, because, for sure you wouldn't want to anticipate it, but perhaps there are situations where you are testing what it would look like to bring in certain types of scenarios into your system. Like if you're doing more of almost scenario planning in a sandbox environment, this would be a really good way to track that as well. But in most cases, any hits here, any occurrences are obviously going to be of concern and worth following up with. And then on kind of the other side, this is more of a look at the antivirus aspects of protecting all systems against malware, and watching for those updates to anti-malware software as well. So we'll give this a second to load, but this is basically going to show us severity over time. We'll see host domain by severity. So kind of a similar look at the dashboard we were just taking a closer look at here. But this is actually going to break this down a little bit more clearly by in a more granular sense into even the event level. So here we see like outliers as an example, as one more kind of tool in your toolkit. It wouldn't necessarily obviously just be for antivirus, but you would have the option to then identify these sort of pink triangles that are saying we're going outside of expected thresholds that we've set within the query. So therefore you could actually set an alert on that, or it could just be that you have the dashboard up and running and it's something that you kind of keep a closer eye on. We'll jump forward to requirement 6, which is developing and maintaining secure systems and applications. So this one is a little bit more broad-based. I think there's another scenario where one dashboard is probably not enough, but it's a good starting place, right? So what we can see here is kind of the Windows update trends. If for example, you're a company that is a heavy Windows organization, and you have a large reliance on making sure that you're constantly patching through updates and making sure that you actually map to what the security updates are that are being received from Microsoft, then in this case, you might be concerned when you see update failure, right? In this case, it's relatively consistent. There might be some valid reasons, but if we did see spikes in some scenarios, then that might be something we want to follow up with. And then you have the option to go a lot more detailed into kind of destination host level. You can see obviously the status, the actual status itself, but then you can even look at the error code and start to pin down why that update is failing and actually be able to act more readily on that. So again, this probably would be one of I would say even one of 5 probably to ensure, or one of 20 for that matter, to ensure that you're maintaining your secure systems internally, because you're having to also track and maintain many different systems, not only Windows, but this would be one way to kind of drill into that. Requirement 7 is restricting access to cardholder data based on business need to know. So in this case, we're looking at user accounts being created, user accounts being deleted, and various active services over time. So we kind of get the advantage here is we can potentially, you could build out segmentations around these various user accounts to make this more applicable to this business need to know concept, and make sure that it's only certain teams that have access to cardholder data. And then you can also see kind of what some of those active services are attached to those data sources, or better understand what unique services you want to drill into. So each of these would be various ways in which you can kind of do those breakouts or segmentation to have more visibility. Requirement 8 is identification and authentication of access to system components. So this is actually the same exact dashboard for a little different use case, which is more saying, let's have a closer look at and identify, for example, excessive failed access attempts, or I want to understand every time a user account is created and that is aligned with the user onboarding data that we see for our HRIS systems or for Okta data. So you can try to really seek out that alignment, and you can envision here ways in which the query could get more specific to your environment. If you're a user of Ping Identity, for example, that might be a situation where you want to bring in that data and then align that back with what HRIS onboarding tools like Workday are telling you and what the user activity is attached to that. Requirement 9 is all about restricting physical access to cardholder data. So previously we were talking more about sort of digital cardholder data purely as it exists within databases, for example. Here we're talking about actual physical interactions with cardholder data. And we can see various breakouts by country over time. We can see actually a map that we can sort of drill into here and kind of get more specific with regional scenarios, or even try to drill down into areas of a given county or city that you want to actually understand why something may be occurring in that particular area. Requirement 10 is tracking and monitoring all access to network resources and cardholder data. So along the same lines as what we've looked at for tracking these various elements of cardholder data, ensuring that it is secure and that it is being accessed in the correct ways. In this case, we can see actually, like in this example, we're looking at an API that is being accessed and by proxy may be issuing that cardholder data or giving access to an engineering team that type of data in particular. So we can see all the failed API calls, which may itself be a set of red flags. We can see console root login failures. And then we even see these login successes. So this is a little bit more of a view into kind of the access management side of house. And then the next piece would be requirement 11. So a little bit of a unique scenario here. I know we're a little over time, but I'll just breeze through these last 2 and then we can take any questions. So requirement 11 is really, in this case, we're looking at container data in particular, and we're saying, how do we go about regularly testing secure systems and processes? So here we can see that images are failing based on malware types, severe CVEs attached to them, and then non-compliant images as well. So if you had a set of containers that you were really interested in tracking, you could then drill in through this dashboard. And obviously this is a less visual dashboard than some of the others that we've seen, but the data sort of is all there to support if you wanted to kind of go into something that is easier to quickly assess and read from that perspective. And then last but not least would be requirement 12. So maintaining a policy that addresses information security for all personnel. So this is really looking at, once you've set a policy, how do you go about auditing and maintaining that and ensuring that it's being executed on successfully. So here we see audit policy changes over time. We see it's kind of up and down significantly. And we see recent policy changes that have occurred. We can also see the breakdown, based on various types of policies that we're tracking. And then here we even look at policies that are specific to just S3 bucket policies. So purely a technical policy, not as much of a qualitative sense in that way. So yeah, just a little bit different view for each of these into how you can actually go about tracking these various changes to policies, and how you would actually also just have more of a meta view on how you're looking at the larger sense of all 12 requirements. So with that, thanks so much for joining. This was obviously a bit of a whirlwind session. This probably could be twice as long a session, or even longer than that. But I was happy to have everyone join and be able to have a quick sense of kind of how we tackle all 12 requirements within Sumo Logic and within our platform. Hopefully this helped to contribute better understanding for you of how you can actually go out and just actually put this to use in the context of your audit requirements, or of PCI compliance, or even broader compliance requirements, which are available within the app catalog. So if you visit sumologic.com/sign-up, you can go ahead and start your free trial from there, and just kind of kickstart the process, start to bring in data, and play with whichever the most applicable requirements are based on what your current challenges or needs are for your business. And I'll just quickly check. I'll see if there are any questions that came through. Looks like a quieter bunch, but certainly feel free. I'll actually even just add my email here, jdunn@sumologic.com. We did have some questions in the last session where folks wanted to get some better understanding of how they could get access to these dashboards within the app catalog, and fine tune them more to what their needs are. So feel free to reach out to me directly, and we can get you whatever resources you might need in order to be successful in that endeavor. So with that, I'll leave it on mute for an extra minute or two in case there are any kind of last minute burning questions. But otherwise, thanks so much for joining. And we're really excited for kind of the rest of the demo webinar series that will be occurring all throughout this week. So feel free to sign up for additional sessions, and we'll look forward to seeing you in the next session. Thanks so much.